Welcome to another episode of our video series of the personal transformation and self-knowledge.
It's great to be back. How are you doing?
Doing really well, thanks. Excited to get into today's topic because we're really stepping onto some advanced ground now.
We really are. So for anyone who's been following along, we've been on this 8-step journey and we've built the bedrock.
Right, the fundamentals. We covered that first step, nayet the intention.
And then Garrett, that sustained, determined effort.
Followed by discipline, of course. You have to have that to keep the momentum.
And all of that leads up to the big one we talked about last time, Cesarette, courage.
That's the necessary leap, isn't it? The point where the path gets a bit uncertain.
Exactly. And taking that leap, it does something more than just move you forward psychologically. It actually expands your field of perception.
And that expansion leads to what we call Feraset, that high-level situational awareness.
Right. Feraset is that competence you get when practice becomes almost reflexive. Your neural networks are just responding optimally.
But today we're going a step beyond even that. We're talking about a very rare capacity called Feraset.
I love this concept.
And me too, because Feraset is when all that internal work starts to produce these breakthroughs that, to an outsider, look almost magical.
Yes, if you're in any kind of innovative field, a designer, a filmmaker, an entrepreneur, this is the skill that you are really chasing.
Because it's the ability to see things that aren't there yet.
It's the ability to notice connections, paths, possibilities that are they're simply not present to the people around you. You see the gaps, you see where things are headed long before the data confirms it.
So like a startup founder who has this Feraset and insists on a pivot, even though the current metrics look perfectly fine.
Exactly. They're seeing a change in the market periphery that no one else has spotted.
Or a film director who casts a total unknown in a huge role because they just see the potential, a pattern of greatness that the industry can't perceive yet.
That is a perfect application. And that gets to the paradox of it. When someone with Feraset tries to explain their vision, we have to do it this way, or this is the only solution, it often defies the current logic.
It seems irrational to everyone else.
It feels like a magical power because the connection they've made is so unique to them. But then, time and again, the prediction turns out to be right.
What's so fascinating here is that this isn't mysticism or some sixth sense. You're saying this is pure neurobiology.
It is. This advanced insight is tied directly to the brain's absolute core competence, which is complex pattern recognition.
Not sequential problem solving.
Absolutely not. We tend to think the brain is best at things like, an accountant balancing books or an engineer writing code.
Line by line.
Yeah, but that sequential thinking is actually something we learn to do much later. The brain's real genius is in synthesis.
And connecting the paths.
Precisely. If you look at the greatest paradigm shifts in history, they almost never came from brute force calculation. They were aha moments.
Right, like the famous Einstein example.
The thought experiment.
Where he pictured a man dropping tools while falling inside a bucket. And from the man's perspective, the tools would just float.
That simple visualization, that one little thought experiment connecting gravity and frames of reference, that led to a complete revolution in physics. He didn't use calculus for that initial breakthrough. He used Feraset.
He saw a pattern that no one else had ever seen.
And it changed human history.
So if these breakthroughs are the result of this insight, what's actually happening in the brain? What's the neurophysics of it?
Okay, so if we look at the brain's its structural layout, you see something pretty remarkable.
Go on.
Only about 10 to 15% of our brain is dedicated to those specific single sensory inputs.
You mean seeing, hearing, taste, touch? The raw data coming in?
Exactly, the receiving stations. That leaves a massive 85 to 90% of the brain for something else.
For integration.
Yes, for integration. We call these the multimodal or association areas. So think of it this way. The specialized areas are like individual musicians. The visual cortex is the violinist, the auditory is the drummer. But the association areas, they're the artistic director.
Their job isn't to play one note.
No, their job is to take the input from every single sense, integrate it all, and then derive meaning and context from it. They connect the color of the sky, the sound of the wind, and a memory from your childhood to form a complete story.
And this is what really sets human cognition apart,
Yeah.
right? Other animals have these areas.
They do, yes, but they're dramatically smaller. A cat or a monkey has them, but it's a tiny percentage. In humans, we have the largest brain relative to body size, and a massive chunk of that extra space is dedicated to these integration centers.
So it's the sheer scale of the connectivity that makes us different.
It's the sheer volume of available connections. It means we don't just process information, we synthesize these incredible narratives and meanings.
And if those circuits are integrating every memory, every sensory input you've ever had, then the patterns they create have to be, well, completely personal.
That is the absolute key mechanism of Feraset. Your unique history, your experiences, all those years of sustained effort, they create a neural signature, a kind of complex fingerprint that is yours and yours alone.
So when you achieve Feraset, your brain is finding connections that literally no one else's brain can find.
They're invisible to others because their brain's foundational structure, their fingerprint, is different.
That makes so much sense. It explains that feeling of solitude that so many innovators talk about. You try to explain your idea, but your colleagues just, they can't see the path you see.
Because their brains don't have the unique connections that you've forged through all that hard work. You're almost speaking a different language.
Which brings us to some beautiful cultural terminology. The people who have this ability are called Feraset Sahibi.
Mm-hmm. And while it often gets translated as just instinct or maybe inner vision, the real etymology gives us a much more powerful metaphor.
And this is where we get to the wide view. You told me the word Feraset actually comes from the Arabic word for horse.
It does. We're talking about achieving at Gurushu the horse view.
Which sounds a bit strange at first, but it's actually a brilliant complement rooted in biology.
It really is. Think about our vision. As humans, we're evolutionary predators. Our eyes are on the front of our heads.
For binocular vision, for targeting and hunting, it's a very narrow-focused view.
Very narrow. But a horse, a prey animal, has its eyes on the sides of its head.
Which gives them that incredible, almost panoramic field of view.
Nearly 320 degrees. They aren't focused on a single target ahead. They're seeing the periphery, the context, the entire environment. They see the subtle shift in the grass that a narrowly focused predator would miss entirely.
So having Feraset is the compliment you pay to a human who has achieved that wide view. Someone who perceives the connections lying outside the standard narrow scope.
You're seeing the whole picture, the hidden influences, the context that exists beyond the immediate problem. It's a holistic understanding.
And the most important takeaway here is that you are not born with this.
No, absolutely not. You earn it.
This is why those 8 steps are so critical. You can't just skip to the end and have this panoramic vision.
You have to go through the stages. That consistent application of Niyet, Garrett, and Seseret, that intention, effort, and courage, that's the daily workout for your multimodal areas.
You're literally training your brain.
That dedicated work frees up that massive portion of your brain. It allows it to move away from mundane sequential tasks and into this truly creative, holistic synthesis.
So the discipline builds the hardware, and the courage flips the switch.
A great way to put it. And that is what allows the doors of Feraset to open naturally. Suddenly, you're advancing down paths that were completely invisible to you before.
It's the ultimate reward for all that effort. You're transforming yourself from someone who follows patterns into someone who creates them.
You become a visionary simply because you now see what nobody else can see.
That's a phenomenal summary. So we've established that Feraset is earned. It's not a gift. And it manifests as this unique, personalized ability to see invisible patterns.
It's a neurobiological gift to the persistent, you could say.
So for the listener who gets there, who earns this horse view, the internal transformation might be complete, but the external challenge, that's just beginning.
Oh, absolutely.
If you gain the ability to see a path that no one else around you recognizes, how on earth do you navigate that? How do you deal with the solitude of it, or just the difficulty of communicating that vision?
And that is the real psychological test, isn't it? It's not about discipline anymore. It's about having conviction in the face of widespread disbelief.
You have to risk it all.
You have to risk everything to act on what you see, knowing that you might fail, and you might fail alone. Or you might just transform the world, but you have to do it without anyone else's validation.
That is the ultimate test of the Feraset Sahibi. Well, thank you for joining us for this look into the capacity of insight. We really encourage you to reflect on what kind of sustained effort it might take to earn your own panoramic view.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.